We're here on Spreaker, September 4, 2018. This is C Major Before the Show, playing by Chords and by Color, Part 6. Welcome to my show today here on Spreaker. It's September 4, 2018. You're here on C Major Before the Show. Thank you for joining me today. And we're on Playing by Chords and by Color, Part 6 for today's episode. So here on today's episode, we're going to talk about chords that you can use, new chords, but at the same time, there will be more parts to come. I won't say how many, but it will be a reasonable number. By the time we make it to the end of the series, you'll be comfortable with what you know, and you'll be comfortable enough to start constructing your own chord progressions, sequences, color coding, following sheet music, and easy playbooks, and knowing what to do when you pick up a piece of music showing you chord symbols. So I look forward to that. So welcome to today's show. I'm excited about today because I feel like it's part of the journey of just knowing how many chords you can put to use and how to use them. I think that it's an important part of your journey if you're aiming for learning to play the piano by chords. So I'm going to take my time today. You'll hear me repeat some of the things that I say because I really want to make sure that you get everything that you need for playing the piano with the chords that we'll discuss today, and I hope you'll stay with me. So, by the time you make it to the end of this series, you should be comfortable with what you know. You'll be comfortable enough to start constructing your own chord progressions, sequences, color coding, following sheet music, and easy playbooks, and knowing what to do when you pick up a piece of music showing you chord symbols. At the very least, you'll have the basics. And then you should just be able to call on the help of a music professional to guide you the rest of the way. So there's going to be a lot of help out there. There's already a lot of help online, if you haven't noticed. You have a guy calling himself the Piano Guy out there. You also have an online series that's out there that you can learn from. There are lots of YouTube celebrity teachers out there talking to you about your piano playing goals. So just go for it. This podcast is kind of a frivolous one in that we are aiming to be that gateway for you in your own way, just using a little bit of color to help you get started. Color is not a new idea. If you open up some of the method books today for beginners, you'll see color a lot of the time. Everything from the John Thompson method to Bastian methods to Faber, Alfred Publishing, and others. I've even used Music for Little Mozarts, which is a great starter for young beginners. However, on this podcast, we are now rolling into adulthood. So earlier, if you were keeping up with how we started out, we started talking to parents, we started talking to students who might listen along with their parents, young students, and then I was aiming to talk with teachers and then other colleagues and just keeping the dialogue going about music making. But now I really want to focus on adulthood because I think that's needed. So if you don't mind, I will be addressing adults on this podcast going forward. And so the idea of color is not a new idea. So again, if you open up some of the older method books and method books today, for beginners, you'll see color a lot of the time. Everything from John Thompson to Bastian to Faber to Alfred Publishing and others. And I have used Music for Little Mozarts, which is a great starter for beginners, ages 4 to 6. So I even have an adult student that likes or prefers to use the younger methods as opposed to the ones intended for adults, because the younger methods have illustrations, very cutesy illustrations of animals doing something on an instrument and using the animals to speak to the learner, which is very cute. However, like I said, this podcast has now rolled over into adulthood, and I mainly want to work with adults because I think that adults can guide their own children into music making by setting an example. I saw this over and over again as I was growing up. Even if you're a grandmother and you're trying to get into music making for yourself and piano playing, there's room for you here on this podcast so you can carry this information back to your families. So the larger question may not be, why not? Why not get into music making? That's a good question, but the larger question for me may be why? Why do you want to do it? You should be clear on why you're getting into music making in the first place, because that will help guide your teacher on the best choices to help you get to where you're going. So music making can be one size fits all, or it could be something else, but it doesn't have to be one size fits all. It doesn't have to be everyone fits into one method. Some other things to consider besides your age are you able and willing to read music and symbols on the page in the first place? That's half the battle. I think it's just having the will to do it and wanting to do it. And age may be a factor. If you find yourself closer to age 52 than you are in your 20s, around 25, then think about, if you want to step into reading music, think about what you may need to read the music in the first place. Sometimes my students use reading glasses if they're older. If they're in their 40s and 50s, they may find themselves needing some help to see what's on the page. So just think about all the things that you may need to help you be successful in reading music if that is your goal. But the Learning a Musical Instrument book talks about this. I won't quote from it today, but just know that this author covers a lot of ground for adults thinking about coming into music making. So, again, just that larger question of why. Why do you want to get into music making? Really, really start to think about that. Is it because you want to become famous? Is it because you want to make music for your family? Is it because you really just want to get into the music game? Is it because you want to get into songwriting and to see if you can make a living from writing songs once you understand how music goes? Why do you want to make music? And why are you listening today? We're talking about playing by chords and by color, part 6. And I'm very happy to announce that school is back in. It's September. So you hear me play the homework sign. That's the homework sign, the homework sound, which is a sign that you should think about if you did your homework or not. So for today's episode, we're going to jump right into your new chords. So thank you for listening today. And stickers. We're going to use stickers today to identify the placement of chords on the keyboard. So that should be fun. Everybody loves stickers. It doesn't matter if you're young. It doesn't matter if you're old. Everybody loves stickers. So the chords we'll introduce in today's episode include D flat, E flat, A flat, G flat, B, and B flat. In the next episode, we'll talk about how to make those minor. The next episode after that, we'll finally start to delve into 7th chords. The next episode after that, we'll talk about 9th chords. And then finally, for the last 3 episodes, we'll plan to focus on blues and jazz progressions that you can use at the keyboard. Now, if any of our plans change for any reason, of course, I will let you know. But thank you so much for hanging in there with us. For anyone wishing to go beyond that, we'll have a different series altogether to get you to think about how to apply some of these chords in different genres. So we'll talk today in terms of black and white key relationship. Then you can check out the C Major Before the Show Facebook page for any sticker updates to show you where to locate the triads for yourself. So think of D flat, E flat, and A flat as the chords that have one white key in the middle. Think of G flat as having all black keys. Think of B as having 2 black keys on top for the 3rd and the 5th. Think of B flat as being the reverse of all of that with 2 white keys on top. I didn't learn my chords this way because I've learned to read music the traditional way, but I found it really helpful for showing adult students how to find their way around the keyboard by describing black and white key relationships. I just saw their eyes glaze over a little less when I talked in simple terms, and if I talked in technical terms, I just saw their eyes really start to glaze over, like, what is she talking about? You've probably heard of KISS in the corporate world. I hope it's still politically correct to say that. I don't know. I'll find out. But the idea is that if you keep it simple, if you keep it friendly, in our case, color-coded, if you will, it makes it more attractive to learn to play the piano for some. It's a pragmatic approach to playing the piano, I think. Also, I want to remind you that today we will take some time at the end of the show to slowly and deliberately walk you through today's homework. So be prepared to spend a 3rd hour with me today. I don't know if it'll take up the whole hour, but I think I'm going to step over to the piano and just see what we can do over there. And I just want to be able to help you out. This is something that you don't have to do. Playing the piano is kind of a luxury, I think, for some. Now, for the first time in the history of the show, we are having a 3rd hour. So even if I just go 1 minute into that 3rd hour, that's still making history on this show because we've been gradually approaching more and more time to spend with you as we go along. So I hope that if you're out there driving on your way to work or commuting in some way or cleaning your house and you have this podcast on, that it helps to take up some of the time while you're doing other tasks, or if you just have the podcast on for background noise. Sometimes people have that when they get older. They just leave the television on all night and just to have some company in the house. So, homework for the 3rd hour. It's September, and Did You Do Your Homework is back. Yes, everything is very suspenseful. But it's all jokes. It's all fun. If you didn't do your homework and you want to work on it in class with me, then the 3rd hour will serve this purpose. I'll also do you a favor and repeat today's instruction in case you get distracted and lose your place in the podcast. I really want you to get this. Also, it's available for download on demand. Week after week, we are aiming to be with you live first. So, what else can I say about these chords without talking about progressions or how they fit into a song or something like that? Let me think about that for a moment. This is C major before the show. So thank you so much for listening today. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. And just to let you know, over here, we are not talking about key signatures. We are not talking about accidentals. We are not talking about notation yet. If that's something that you want to know something about, keep listening. We may do it in a way that's also friendly, that doesn't scare you away. Even if we talk in terms of text notation, letter notation, or color notation, I'll try to describe everything in the simplest terms. Now, for more formal terms, please go over to the C Major radio show. I've even hesitated to use the word triad today. But I think it's important because triad, like triangle, like tricycle, like anything with tricolor, you know it means three, right? So even talking about playing chords in the simplest way with 3 notes with a space between each note. So a little bit later I'm going to mention that there's a method that even defines chord as 2 notes. So that's up for grabs, I guess, in a manner of speaking, which one you prefer for describing chords. But we are going to say triad and say a little bit more about that a little bit later. So just to describe what we've done so far. And I've taught off and on with adults long enough to know what scares them and what keeps them coming back to learn more. So for our purposes here, I will say that we are playing the simplest chord. And the word chord itself does not have a very precise meaning. For instance, I could say chord, 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 just repeating it multiple times in a row. And you won't even know what I mean as I'm saying the word repeatedly. Also, it may sound like I'm saying C-O-R-D and not C-H-O-R-D. But the point is this, there's no limit to the number of notes in a chord. Did you know that? There is a limit to the number of fingers that you can use to play a chord if you're a pianist. Sometimes if the chords become multiple notes, you may use your thumb to play 2 notes so you can reach the other notes. Sometimes students aren't able to reach as far as you would like them to reach to play their chords, and then they have to roll their chords, but that's another issue. We're talking about centuries, especially in Western music where chords have been in use. Chords are especially popular in popular music. So as you begin to learn and practice playing by chords, by color, by ear, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to begin to hear how one chord leads to another chord. That's one of my favorite things to talk about because I recently sat down with a musician who's a bass player, and he was saying that his job is to find out where the music is going and to catch that very quickly, which is why he keeps getting work as a bass player. He's very good at that. But your job is to listen to how chords lead away from other chords or how they lead to another chord. So just become really involved in how you listen to chord changes because chords are not isolated events, as one author puts it. So we're trying to keep our arrangement of the chords simple. In other words, we have not explored how to repeat one or more of the 3 notes in a chord in different pitches or octaves. And if you only knew how many chords, meaning chord positions, that C major can produce, you just might be amazed at it all. Let me say that again. When I say C major, I'm not talking about myself. I mean a C major chord. It's spelled C-E-G, but what if you want to expand that? What if you want to play your chords in fuller position, as sometimes it's called? So for instance, you can play, and I'm going to use a technical term here, octave. Octave like the word octagon, meaning 8. So if you're playing octave in your left hand and then you decide in your right hand to break that C chord so that you can play it as E, G, C. Play it as a first inversion triad in the right hand and then keep a C octave in the left. That's a fuller position. It's going to give you a fuller sound. So there's so many ways to play chords that if you just open up your mind. And I think when you're watching some of these videos, that's their point. They try to illustrate that. They really try to demonstrate that as well, to say anybody can play the piano. Just sit down and just start playing arpeggios, broken chords, playing the piano in minutes. So you hear that claim. You hear that claim. And then when it comes to rote learning, especially on black keys, you can sound like you know what you're doing there too by playing what they call using musical mapping, but that's meant for another conversation. So here we're talking about chord. There is no limit to the number of notes in a chord, but there is a limit to the number of fingers that can play a chord if you are a pianist. So we're talking about centuries, especially in Western music, where chords have been in use. Chords are especially popular in popular music, so as you begin to learn and practice playing by chords, by color, by ear, I just challenge you to begin to hear how one chord leads to another chord. Listen to how chords lead away from other chords. Become involved in how you listen to chord changes, because they are not isolated events, as one author puts it. We are keeping the arrangements of the chords simple. In other words, we have not explored how to repeat one or more of these 3 notes in a chord in different pitches or octaves yet. If you only knew how many chords, meaning chord positions, that a C major chord can produce, then you just might be amazed at it all. And that's where I really wanted to get some of my math friends involved, because they can come up with formulas to help describe these types of combinations. Just take CEG, for instance. How many ways can you arrange and repeat these letters and play them on a keyboard? The chords that have been illustrated to you here on this podcast and illustrated to you online are laid out so that you can see how to play these on the piano. So if you've ever been to a music retail store, you'll see, if you ask for a chord chart, that it's laid out either with dots and no letter names, or with shading and letter names. So it just depends. There's one chord chart that's plastic. It's very tough plastic, very sturdy plastic. And I believe everything is spelled out in dots, so you can see that. And then there's another chord chart that you can purchase that's paper, but it's 2 pages, I believe. So if you open it up, you just see chords side by side, and then there's gray shading to show you where these chords can be spelled on a piano, on a keyboard. Either one is good. It really depends on how you best learn. So if you're a visual learner that just wants to see dots, you want to see location and not worry about letter names, then I would go with the one that's the plastic chord chart. And then the paper chord chart is if you want to know how these chords are spelled. So many options out there, and of course there are chord books that you can purchase. So just get with your retail professional and just ask what's possible. Ask them to really dig for you. Do your homework before you go to the store so you won't go there and be disappointed that you can't find what you're looking for. And then if you don't have the option of being in an area where there's a retail store close to you, I would say start to search online. And even if it means sending me a quick message that you need help locating something, I'll be happy to help you with that. So we've been trying to illustrate to you online over at C Major before the show. I have my hand model showing you how to place your hands on the keyboard the way that he's doing over there. And then I've taken the time to put some color strips on the keyboard as well. And today we're going to depart from that and just use stickers. So you'll see that a little bit later on. So it's just laid out to show you how you can play these on the piano. Now, it's not meant to show you how to practice them yet. We haven't really talked about that. I'm not talking about playing it in a way so that you don't harm yourself, but try to use your own sense of when you're doing something that's uncomfortable for you and find a way to make it comfortable. Get yourself to your nearest music professional. There are classes that talk about this, that talk about how to breathe when you're playing, the best posture, things like that. So you really want to take care of yourself when you're playing the piano and not just jump in and start playing in a way that's going to harm you physically. And to just be comfortable and just to have fun. So back to the subject of chords, it's possible to think of chords even in terms of singers. So as you begin to explore how to change the order of your chords and work on inversions on your own, just think about how singers do that, how they lay out their voices differently to accommodate each voice range. And I was talking with a musician friend about this the other day. We see this in choirs, we see this in quartets, we see this in gospel quartets. The arrangement of the notes of the chords can make a huge difference in the sound that you produce. So the other exciting thing we can do with chords is to break them up. Very exciting to break them up. I worked with a student on this over the weekend. She wanted to learn how to play chords to accompany the melody to Heart and Soul. You know that, Heart and Soul. Everybody knows that. Almost everybody. But when you start to see how to break up chords into various patterns, it opens up a whole new world. We see this all the time in 18th century keyboard music with Alberti bass and arpeggios. Arpeggios just mean harp in Italian. And we can even go back to the time of J.S. Bach and see how he was able to use broken chords in his compositions and his preludes. Me personally, I've come to love to play by chords and think structurally, because when I was taking piano lessons, to be honest, when I memorized something, I really just did it from muscle memory. And I could visualize a page of music in my head or pages of music, and then my hands would just connect with that as I played from memory in recitals. But it wasn't until much later that I really started to think in terms of structure. Because if you do that, you realize how simple it all is. It really is simple. I wish growing up that somebody had said to me, "You've got this already. You already know all of this. If you know how to play a C major scale, then you're going to be successful when it comes to playing the Clementi Sonatina in C, or a Mozart sonata where you have to play lots of scales. And then you know what the formula is. It's a set formula for a sonata or a sonatina. If you just study that structure and know where the changes can be anticipated, it helps you to really know the piece. But that's getting more technical. That's more reserved for the C major radio show. I have to stay focused on this show where we're trying to break it down, make it simple, keep it friendly. So, what else can we say about chords, though? I would like to give you some other ways that chords are discussed back in the mid-20th century. So, I'm going to do that back in a moment. So let me take you back to the mid-20th century. You're in 1954. Use your imagination to take yourself back. You're traveling back in time. And I'm looking at an example in a yellow method book. This publication was made available at the time through Warner Brothers Publications and their distributors, it seems. I looked it up. Apparently, the printed music operation was sold to Alfred Publishing in the 21st century in 2005. But this old method from 1954 features piano courses for the younger student and the older student. However, we're going to talk about the discussion of chords and the way that it was presented in the 1950s. So I enjoyed looking at this method book because the illustrations are so interesting. There's a picture of a clown talking about chords. His words are printed in a speech bubble. On the other side of the speech bubble is a television, you know, the old-fashioned kind with 3 turn dials at the base of the cabinet below the screen. On the television screen is a magician with a cape and a top hat. That reminds me, I just saw something on television. It was late at night, and it was an episode by Alfred Hitchcock, one of my favorite series to watch, because it's all so mysterious. And it featured a magician and a young boy that wants to know more about magic and how to do the magic. But anyway, getting back to the method. So here in this method, you have an illustration. The clown says in his speech bubble, the magician can do many tricks. We can do tricks with notes by playing several at one time. When you put 2 or more notes together, we have a chord. So that's what I was talking about earlier, that if you think of chord as being a triad, or the simplest chord as being a triad, think again, because in some cases you can define a chord as 2 notes played together, or as a harmonic second. So later on in the same book, you have a chance to play old chords and new chords described as something old, something new. The right hand plays new chords, and then what I enjoyed most about seeing this method is that they included pictures of Yosemite Sam and Porky Pig, plus Bugs Bunny. How nostalgic is that? So today here on the episode, I'm going to do something totally different in our discussion. I'm going to put chords and the use of chords in some historical context for you here as we talk about what was going on in the mid-20th century in America. So if you're in a place where you can just close your eyes and imagine for a moment you're back in the mid-century years. Gospel music is popular. During the 1950s, the electric organ, amplified guitars, and drums were added to the standard gospel ensemble. And by the 50s, we moved away somewhat from the gospel pianist that used primarily diatonic and blues harmonies. They rarely modulated and embellished moderately the basic material. And by this time, the chordal piano style has become more common, with an emphasis on low-pitched chords in the left hand played at the same time with high-pitched chords in the right hand. And if you watched the funeral of Aretha Franklin the other day on television, you heard someone mention the Ward Singers. So in 1957, the Ward Singers was the first gospel group to sing at the Newport Jazz Festival. In the 1950s, gospel singers began to appear on television. They were led first by Mahalia Jackson on the Ed Sullivan Show. Mahalia Jackson was a leader of this and ended up with her own Mahalia Jackson show in September 1954 on CBS. In 1954, Alex Bradford made history when he organized the first all-male gospel choir in history, as distinguished from the male quartet. And in the South, female quartets began to attract attention, most notably the Southern Harps spiritual singers and the original gospel harmonettes. In 1957, the Newport Jazz Festival enticed the Ward Singers to move outside the church and sing at the festival. And the next year, the festival organizers persuaded Mahalia Jackson to sing. Thereafter, gospel too had its place alongside jazz and blues at New York jazz festivals. James Brown had his first hit song, Please, 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 in 1956. But getting back to 1954, the first rock and roll record was recorded in 1954 by a group called the Chords. By the way, I found the song on iTunes on an album called Doo-Wop Classics. It's a good tune. It sounds fun, and you may appreciate hearing the simple chord changes in a song entitled Shaboom or Shaboom. We could also go on to talk about opera, singers, instrumentalists, and composers and what they were all doing with music making in the 1950s. I'll save that discussion for another time or save it for the C Major radio show. I would like to add that in memory of Professor George Walker, who recently passed away in August, he began his professional career as a concert pianist. He obtained his musical education at Oberlin and the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. I never met him, although I understand that he lived in Montclair, New Jersey. During the 1950s, he began receiving scholarships and awards that enabled him to study in Europe and to compose. We can even talk about other composers of the 1950s, but I think I'll wait and shift this conversation later on in a different episode. I just can't help wonder what they would have said about the state of music making in the 1950s. So hopefully that helps that helps you put some things into context about some of the types of music making that were taking place in the 1950s. And you'll hear me talking about the 1950s a lot on this podcast. It's a period in our history that I'm really curious about when it comes to music making. Let's move on. The last couple of podcasts I did, I promised that I'll offer you music terms. So now we're going to spend some time, a considerable amount of time today, on those, because the focus of the podcast is playing by chords and by color. It's a series. So far, we're up to part 6 in this series. But to go along with that, I'm also trying to introduce you to some common terms in hopes of ushering you over to the C Major Radio Show. So when you're finished over here, please feel free to go over there for more technical talk. We'll talk shop on that show and in way more depth. So now these terms that I'm talking about, they started out as terms that were available to parents as must-know terms, but now I'm making it available to everyone. So if you are an adult and you are listening, there might be something in this for you. So here we go. Must-know music terms. So this is helpful for anyone who wants to keep track of piano lessons and the way they progress. So it could be the piano lessons of your child if you are a parent. It could be just piano lessons in general, and you really want to get ahead on some of the terminology. Yes, we still use Italian. Yes, we still use German. Yes, we still use French to describe what's going on in music, especially in classical music and Western music. But I think it's useful. I think that if you know these terms, then it helps you to create a shortcut for yourself when you're trying to describe what's going on in other music too. I was just talking with a friend about this. I'll say more about that later. But just know that if you are a non-musician and you're listening to someone talk about music, I know for a fact that it may feel confusing. You may feel really confused. You may feel really frustrated. I encourage you to not just brush it off and just say, well, I don't know anything about that, so I'm not listening. Or to say, this is above my head. Because if you really try, I think you can learn. I mean, that was the reason why I think we had music appreciation after high school. So if you were taking any college courses, if you were a football player, that was one of the required courses to take music appreciation. It was in the curriculum in college. So you're encouraged to know a little something. Everybody can learn a little something about something. So just know this is not a case where a little learning is a dangerous thing. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is that to take out some of that confusion, to take out some of that frustration, that if you just understand the journey, if you just understand what's going on with the endeavor of music making, I think it can really help you just turn your attitude around, that if you just commit to learning a little bit about music, just a little bit of the common terms, that this can help you in your learning. So here we go. We've talked about some of these already, so you know what scale is. But let me just give you a definition. And this is from a handout that I was able to download online. If you would like to know where to get this handout for yourself, then I can lead you to that, but you will need to let me know that you want to know specifically where to get this. So the way that they've described these terms is really all on them. I'm not even sure where they got this information from. But but it's one way to describe it. So let's just go through each one. So the first term that's common is scale. So you heard me talking about scales earlier when I mentioned classical music and how it's easy to think structurally. And if you just think, oh, I know this already, I got this. I can play a C major scale, then I got this passage here in the sonatina and the sonata. I don't have to relearn anything. It looks like a lot of dots on the page, but if you just really start to think about what's going on technically and structurally, it will help you. So a scale is defined as a set of notes that are played in a sequence of either increasing pitches or decreasing pitches. There are two types of scales, major and minor scales. So that's what I mean. This is a broad definition of what scales are. And so, of course, there are more than major and minor scales. There are harmonic scales, there are melodic scales. But this is a conversation starter. This is also a conversation you can have around the water cooler at work. It's a conversation you can have if you're out to dinner with friends over at Tavern on the Green in New York. If you're at a fundraiser and you want to really relate to someone who might know about classical music, this is one way to start talking. Say, hey, what do you know about scales? That probably sounds funny. One of my students would laugh if I said that. So again, we try to have a sense of humor here on the podcast as well. But what I can imagine is that if you're a parent, for instance, you might just approach the music teacher and say, hey, when is my child going to be learning about scales? Or you can have that conversation with your child. Have you learned anything about scales yet? And then your child might say, well, what's a scale, Mommy? What's a scale? Daddy? What's a scale? And then you can just explore that together. I mean, there's so much information out there that it's just a click away from learning more and more and more. And that can become a moment just between you and your child to learn more about scales and what that means. But it's definitely something you can bring up to the teacher. When is my child going to be ready for scales? Every teacher may introduce scales differently. So if they're learning by rote, early on they may decide scales should be introduced earlier in the curriculum as compared to another method that may offer scales once you reach level 1A, for instance, or level 1B, if it's labeled that way on the method books. A set of notes that are played in a sequence of either increasing pitches or decreasing pitches. So, notes, sequence, pitches. Those are keywords. And then, of course, major and minor. So you can start to pick apart the terms and what the definition is saying, and to really try to understand what it all means, if you're that curious. So now let's move on to chords. So we've been talking about playing chords by color, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about here on this podcast. So a group of notes, usually 3 in parentheses. So see what I was talking about? That sometimes when you look up a definition, it will just automatically go to 3. Whereas we saw in a method that says 2, a group of notes, as little as 2 notes can be considered a chord. A group of notes that are played together. That's really what you want to focus on in this term. They sound nice when played simultaneously. Now I have to chuckle on that one. I'm not going to even play the laugh effect on that one. I just have to chuckle to myself because chords can sound nice, but sometimes they may not sound so nice when played at the same time. So again, if you're reading this definition and you're a teacher, you may go, okay, well, what about broken chords? So chords can sound nice when they're not played at the same time. But that's still a basic definition. So if you go to a music teacher, let's say you're shopping around for a music teacher that you're going to be comfortable with, or let's say if you're online and you send a Facebook comment to someone that's teaching online and just get their ideas. Hey, what do you think about the basic definition of chord? How would you describe chord? How would you define chord? That's also another way to tell, too, if you have the right instructor, if this is someone who's going to work out for you in your music learning. You may find that you don't want to deal with someone that's not open to multiple ways to describe something. If they say, absolutely not, a chord cannot be 2 notes, it can only be 3 notes, then you might just ask them to really explain that, and then just to give you some resources to study for yourself, just recommendations. That's really where you begin to understand the background, the experience of a teacher, if that's important to you, just to know that they can point you to other resources, that everything is not just a fixed idea, like this is the way it is, that's it. There's no room for other explanations. So far we talked about scale, we talked about chord. Let's talk about octave. You heard me mention octave today. So notes that are the same but have different pitches. So there's that word pitch again. We haven't started talking about pitches so much. I've mentioned letter names, but I haven't really gone into pitch. I may have said pitch, but I didn't really give an explanation for pitch. Over at the C Major Radio Show, we're definitely going to start talking about pitch. So just know if you want a more in-depth discussion, just see me over there. But octave, so think of the word octopus. Think of octagon. 8 implies 8. Although in this description they say, consider a D note. The note that is an octave above is 7 notes higher in ascending order. So that just means if you start on D and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 up to the other D, then you get an octave. But if you start counting on the note after D, then you're counting 7 notes higher, which is still an octave, as long as you land on the higher D in this case. So it's in ascending order. It's E, F, G, A, B, C, and then back to D. So the second note is also a D, but it is 7 notes higher, and is thus exactly 1 octave higher. So that's how they describe it in this handout. So next, I'm going to talk to you about keys, sharps, and flats. Okay, and again, just as terms. Today we're not going into explanation of how to apply these, but just really getting you to think about terms so that you can have conversations with music professionals and to start getting a little bit more used to the language. Okay, so I'll be right back in a moment. Okay, so talking about the key of music. The key of music is the scale on which the music is based. So I love talking about keys because it's so controversial. I mean, if you have perfect pitch, then you can really only stand to hear something in a key that it's written in and that it's perfect, that it's tuned, that it's not a half step higher than it's supposed to be. It's not a half step lower. It's perfectly tuned. And you know what key something belongs in. I just can't imagine that someone would want to change the keys to everything that they play just so they're comfortable playing those. But it does happen. It does happen. I saw a case once when I was helping out at a service, and the music director kept changing the keys. At first, I thought this music director was just doing it to be totally obnoxious and not telling me ahead of time. And I could follow it, but it was just very curious the way that it was done. So here you are looking at a score, and then the music director decides to play it 5 steps lower than what you're seeing it. And then, of course, that means you have to transpose, but that wasn't the problem. It's just I found out later that the reason for doing that was because the singers weren't trained singers, and so they could only sing within a certain range. And then we found out the hard way what happens when you play it in the original key, that the range is just totally off. They're really stretching their voices, and it's just too much of a strain on their vocals. So just know that when you see something that's in the key of something, that it may or may not be played in that key. But the key of music is the scale in which the music is based. And then you have musicians that say there are no keys. Music is just music. You just jump in and you just start playing. I mean, music is in the key of life. You hear people say that. And so it all depends on you, how you really want to think about it. But this definition is definitely basic, and it's something that, again, you can just bring up and say, hey, what do you know about keys? What can you tell me about keys? What keys will I be learning in first? Will I start in C and stay in C? Or will I be using multiple keys at first? How are you going to teach me? So we haven't really talked about keys that much at all because we've just been talking about chords. But one basic definition I can tell you about chords to know what key you're in is that you can tell the key of something by the chord that it starts with and the chord that it ends with. In some cases, I don't even want to say in most cases, because someone could argue, oh, well, I'm in the key of C, but I'm starting with an F chord. But I am going to end with a C chord. So that gets into another whole can of worms. It really depends on the composer. But let's just take something basic like Amazing Grace. So your first chord for Amazing Grace, if you're playing in the key of C, could be a C chord. If you're playing it in the most basic way. Amazing. When you play amazing, you're playing a C chord. Okay? And then you go on to other chords. And then by the time you make it to the end, was blind, but now I see. You should be ending on a C chord if you're in the key of C. So that's just one basic example of that. So a song in the key of C major is built upon the notes from the C major scale. So remember in the last episode when I had you chord the notes of a C major scale, we really didn't get into a lot of what you were playing exactly. And I didn't want to talk in those technical terms because we could start talking about diminished chords. But I'm going to save that for later. When we start talking more about maybe when we start talking more about blues progressions and other chords that you can use in blues and jazz. We'll see. Okay, so far I've taught you scale, chord, octave, and key. And now let's move into sharps. So a sharp symbol, I love this because if you don't know that you're looking at a sharp, you may confuse that with a number sign. So you may just be looking at a piece of music and you go, what are all these number signs doing here? It's kind of like a number sign, but not really. It's more slanted, I believe. But a sharp symbol beside a note increases its pitch by a semitone or a half step. Or you could say go to the next key up. You could say it that way in more simple terms. In other words, it refers to the next higher note, which is what I just said. So that's sharps. So when you think of sharp, you just think of raising something. So that's another question you can ask your prospective music teacher. When are we going to talk about sharps? How soon will we get to flats? Flats would be the next term. A flat looks like a little b, like a lowercase b, beside a note, and it decreases its pitch. It lowers it. Decreases its pitch by a semitone or a half step. So in other words, it refers to the next lower note. So that's the definition for flats. Now, tempo. I love talking about tempo because once we start talking about tempo, we have to talk about beats per minute. And I like to, at this point, start talking about the use of a metronome. So if you're with me on tomorrow's show over the C Major Radio Show, I do plan to play the sound of a metronome so you can hear that click. So a metronome either uses a click or a flash. And the basic definition of a metronome we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes, but let me get to tempo first. So you can talk about time. You can talk about time signature. We're going to get to those too, or time values. We've been talking about that over at the C Major Radio Show. But here's the thing. Even if you're playing by chords and you're able to get from one chord to the next, that still doesn't tell you how fast you should be playing. So if you're playing a song by chords and every chord you're holding for 2 counts, for instance, that's fine. That's great for telling you how much value in terms of time that you're giving that chord. But it doesn't tell you how fast you're going to be playing, especially if you're playing with other musicians. Are you going to be playing at a fast tempo? Or are you going to be playing at a slow tempo? Those are things that you need to know. So the speed at which a piece of music should be played. I like this because who's to say what it should be played at? But I think music also dictates sometimes what the tempo should be or what the tempo could be. But I've also heard it sometimes when the tempo is altered just slightly, that the music is expressed better. It doesn't feel as rushed. It doesn't feel wrong, if we can use that word. It feels right. Okay, now metronome. A metronome is a device that you can pick up. You can go to any music retail store you want, and they should have a metronome or be able to order you one. But a metronome is a device that produces a beat or a click at regular intervals. Musicians use these sounds as reference so that they can keep to the tempo of the song. And then right underneath that, you have BPM. Also one of my favorite terms because even if you're a DJ, you know about BPM, beats per minute. So BPM is something that stands for beats per minute. And it's a unit used to indicate the tempo of the music. So have you ever picked up a piece of music and of course you didn't know what you were looking at because you're just starting out and you want to know what these things mean, and then you see something at the top with a number. So it may have a picture of a quarter note, an equal sign, and then it says a number like 96 or 76 or 72 or 60 in some cases. But there are an assortment of numbers to choose from, depending on how fast you need to go in the music. And the metronome helps you with that setting. So let me let you absorb that for a moment. I've gone over quite a few terms: scale, chord, octave, key, sharps, flats, tempo, and metronome. I'll be right back. You're here on the C Major Radio Show, and I think I mentioned in the last episode that I'm not going to be doing a student shout-out. So if you're tuning in to hear those, just know that we've decided to bring those to a halt. But I would like to give you a shout-out. So if you're listening, give an applause for yourself today. I think it's great that you're here. I think that if you are aiming to learn something more about music, then kudos to you. That's a great thing, because that means you really want to grow in your understanding of how music works. And let me say this too, that if you are a non-musician, I know for a fact that you think about music differently than musicians. I've even had some of my adult students say to me, "Oh, playing the piano is a little bit like typing, right?" And I just look at them and go, not really. It's not really like typing. It's better than typing. So you don't want to make someone feel bad for their understanding of what they think it will be like to play a musical instrument. But again, the fact that they're asking, they're interested, and your job is to maintain that interest, that's a good thing. So if you are looking to get into music making, some of these terms that I'm saying to you today, just make a note of these, and don't be afraid to ask your music professional or the person that you're thinking about taking lessons from if they can talk to you about these terms, and to help you understand what they mean. So this is, of course, beyond chords. If you start to get into what's involved in learning to play an instrument. So practicing, we haven't talked about practicing much. We've talked about the idea of trying to spend 5 to 6 minutes a day practicing something. And then, of course, you would add to that. Ideally, I like to see my students practice 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, to see success in their classes. And if they don't, they won't. But I've relaxed that a little bit, because I feel that in a time where everyone's busy, everyone's on their mobile devices, there's so many interruptions throughout your day. If you can just spend 5 to 6 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week, that's good. It's almost like what you're saying you're going to do when you go to the gym. It's just spending a little bit of time just working on yourself. And you will start to see some progress. But if you don't spend any time at all, it's going to be difficult. And it's difficult to say, unless you're a genius, to say you've just been thinking about it all and now you can just come to the piano or the instrument and just do it. So it takes practice. So if you're willing to practice and not limit yourself, I think you'll go far. If you start to think about your limitations, then you won't get very far, because you'll always be thinking about how limited you are. But what I love to see in my students, the ones that I do have, God bless them all, is that if they're just willing to spend a little bit of time during the week, whatever they can spend, they start to see that they're able to progress. And they know when they're not progressing. And then they either want to do more or they either want to do less or just stop altogether. But the ones that I've seen that are just willing to put a little bit of time into it, they start to see the benefit and then they want to continue with that, because now you're not only winning the approval of family members, you're winning the approval of your friends. You're winning the approval of other students, especially if you have the opportunity to participate in an open mic and others can hear you and it's in a safe environment and no one's going to judge you. So that's what music practice can mean. It can mean that for yourself as an adult learner. It can mean that for yourself if you are a professional already. You know what practice does, and you know what not practicing does. So, if you aren't able to practice, then I will say at least aim to be a great sight reader. So that's the next term. It's called sight reading, and it's hyphenated. Sight reading. Reading and performing a piece of music that you have not seen before. So, if any of my musician friends from Facebook, if you're listening, I know you know about this, that somebody put something in front of you the day before you're supposed to perform it or the day of, and you're supposed to just know it. I saw for myself as a witness to a music professional, very famous, very well known, has recordings, has publications, you name it, all of that, Grammy Award winning artist. And here this person was. I'm not going to say if it's a he or a she. I'm going to protect their identity. But here this person was on stage with a mobile device to the ear, listening to a song that they were supposed to be playing literally within 10 minutes. So this person, of course, had to be very good at listening to hear the structure, listening for chord changes, listening for melody, listening for all of these things to know if he's got the song. I even heard that Aretha Franklin did that. That if you gave her a song prior to a performance, like the day of, I heard that Whitney Houston did that. If you just let her listen to something right before she's supposed to go on stage, then she had that level of professionalism to be able to know what the song was doing and then go on stage and just add what she could give to it. And that's what professionals do. But if you're not a professional, you're an amateur, you can start to do this for yourself too. So, in a manner of speaking about chords, somebody puts a chord sequence in front of you. Just based on what you learned in this podcast, you should be able to play a song that uses 3 chords. There's so many careers that have been made off of just 3 chords. So imagine someone says, oh, it's just 1, 4, 5. You're like, what's that? Okay, it's a C chord, an F chord, and a G chord. And then you go, oh, I know those chords. If you could play those chords at the right time, you're hired. That's just how it works. And especially in some of this old-time gospel music, quartet music, if you listen to the Jackson Southernaires and the Canton Spirituals and the Dixie Hummingbirds and a lot of those old groups where they were just learning how to play electronic instruments and how to bring that into their own music making. And you have something as simple as 3 chords, which can take you very far, especially if you know how to bring the changes that are needed. So, sight reading doesn't always have to mean you're sight reading by reading notes. It could also mean you're sight reading by reading a lead sheet or a chord chart as well. But if you practice and you're able to practice, it's better for you. Trust me on that one. Okay, now, tuning an instrument. I get this all the time. I love this question because There are some people that don't understand that if you buy an instrument that you can plug into a wall, that you probably don't have to tune it. So, for instance, if you have a Clavinova, if you have a Yamaha digital upright piano, if you have a Casio keyboard, if you have a Roland Phantom, whatever the case might be, this is something that you plug into a wall. It's already tuned. So the computer has done all of that for you. It's all digital. You don't need to have it tuned. There are no strings inside of the instrument that need to be tweaked with a piano tuner's tools. But you do want to, and you can do this on an electronic instrument, the ones that have the ability to change the pitch. You can adjust the instrument to the desired pitch. So in that way, you are tuning. But tuning an instrument is important. But I get the question about whether or not it's necessary to tune their digital piano versus a real piano. So the process of tuning even a guitar, for instance, would mean tightening or loosening the strings. The same thing. When you look inside of a piano and you see the harp there, you see the strings. You want to have it tuned in a way that's going to increase or decrease the pitch. And that's what this term is saying here. So tuning an instrument is an important question. So, of course, if you are thinking about taking lessons, learning a musical instrument, that's one of the things that you want to know about too. So, when you are at that dinner party and you want to bring up the subject of tuning an instrument, it's going to make you sound knowledgeable, and it's going to open up the conversation if it comes around that it fits in the conversation. Now let's move into something called musical works. Now this is my favorite because even if you are, everything's my favorite, by the way, but this is also one of my favorite things to talk about, musical works, because if you are a subscriber, let's say to a concert series, then you know that there are musical works that will be played within the series. So whether it's a concerto or a nocturne, you want to know what that is. Now, I had a student that attended a concert for the first time. She had never been to New York and had never attended a concert before and was not quite sure when the piece started versus when it ended. And it was interesting, I would say it like that, the experience that she had. And we were able to talk about it afterwards. But just look up those words. I'm going to spell it for you. I'm not going to say the definition of that. Concerto is C-O-N-C-E-R-T-O. You can say concerto or concerto. Nocturne. I will say that some of the most famous nocturnes are written by Chopin, so that's spelled Nocturne. Etude. Now, I will say something about this because I had a student who is learning to play etudes now, and etude is just a French word for study. So, it's a short composition designed as an exercise for musicians to work on a particular technique, and that's true. Suite. I will say something about this because Christmas is going to be here soon and everybody's going to be hearing about the Nutcracker Suite somewhere. And so a suite is a group of musically related dance movements. Now, suite is not spelled S-W-E-E-T. It's spelled S-U-I-T-E. So sometimes you may look at that word and go, suit? No, it's suite. So some popular suites include the Nutcracker Suite or the Carmen Suite. And then we go into other other forms. So you have the sonata allegro form. I was talking about sonata earlier. Sonatina, rondo, and minuet. So I'm hesitating to talk about these because I think I'd rather come back to those at another time. That's something that we talk about over at the C Major radio show. But you did hear me say about the key of a sonatina and a sonata and playing a C major scale within those. You did hear me say that earlier. But I'd rather not spend time on that today. But if you want to know these terms, feel free to message me so I can talk with you about those. Okay, now let's get back to something a little bit more basic, because you heard me mention time signature, you heard me mention key signature, you heard me mention tempo. I have not mentioned staff, and I have not mentioned clef. So in this particular handout, what the person does is they show you a score. Like what I was saying to you, if you mosey on over to musicnotes.com or sheetmusicplus.com or any of those sites like that where you print sheet music, you will see in the sheet music, you will see a staff, you will see a clef or clefs, you will see a key signature, you will see a time signature, and you will see indications of a tempo. So let me just break this down a little bit for you, just in case you happen to do that, because the long and the short of it is that if you're learning to play by chords, you don't have to worry about any of those things. You're simply looking at the chords, the chord names above that. So let me just take some time here to talk to you about that. So I'm going to turn my music down, and it's just going to be you and me for the moment. And then I'll turn the music back up. Okay, staff. Or sometimes in the case of more than one staff, you'll say staves. You're going to see all of this. But just know above the staff, you have letter names. Those are your chords. And then you may ask something basic, and don't feel embarrassed. What are those lines with the dots in them? What is that? Those little boxes. That's for the guitar, to know how to play the chords. So if you see sheet music that says piano, vocals, guitar, then just pay attention to the piano part, because the piano part would be the letter names of the chords. So look for some of the simplest sheet music that you can find that doesn't have a number 7, meaning you're supposed to play 7 chords, or number 9, that means you're supposed to play 9 chords or 11 chords. We're not there yet, and we're supposed to get there by the end of this Play by Chords and by Color series. So also let me say this to you, that if you have been color coding your chords, continue to do that. I've just stopped a little bit because I want to have you focus on where the chords are placed. And in today's episode, I'm going to help you find stickers to place on the keys so that you can keep up where the chords are located on your keyboard. So we're going to do that for you today, but feel free to color code it as you wish. Your color code is your color code. And if you ever come to lessons with me, then just know I may be using color to help you visually see what's going on the page, to help separate some of those things, isolate some of those things, to help you see it more clearly. But imagine you have stumbled upon a piece of sheet music. You may have something in front of you. You may go online to one of those sites I talked about, and then you're faced with a staff, and you just go, what is this? So in the case of Easy Play, you'll see 5 horizontal lines where musical notes and symbols are written on the staff. In the case of Easy Play notes, you'll see the letter written inside the notes. In my case of working with adults with text notation, we didn't have note shapes at all. We just dealt with the letters. and put those on a staff, or we didn't use a staff at all, just to show how to spell out the chords they were playing. But notes are written on the lines and the spaces of the staff. So again, if you're playing by chords, don't pay attention to any of that. Just pay attention to the letter names above these notes. So those are your chord changes. And that's how you learn to play by chords. Now you can color code those. Try to find the simplest one. Look for the score that says easy piano. And in some cases, easy piano is not easy enough for someone who's beginning to play piano. It's easy to me, but it may not be easy to someone who's just starting out. So just be careful of that too. And don't be afraid to take it to a music professional. Now the good news about that is that you can download one page and just start to look at it. It's free. It'll watermark it by saying sample on the page. And of course, if you want more than that, please go by the copyright laws and then pay for the copy. And then you'll have the whole entire song. But if you're just sampling a song, you can just print out the first page. And it's okay. You can take that and do a lot with it. The next thing would be clefs. Now I love discussing clefs because for pianists, mostly we are dealing with treble clefs, we're dealing with bass clefs, and that's it. Until you really get into music theory and then you realize, oh, I really need to deal with alto clefs and tenor clefs as well. So, but the clefs tell us which notes correspond to which lines and spaces. So if you really want to talk more in depth about clefs, come over to the C Major Radio Show. We're going to be talking about that. Not just bass clef and treble clef, but also alto clef and tenor clef as well. But most commonly, what you'll see on sheet music, you'll see just the treble clef, or you'll see the grand staff, which has treble clef and bass clef. And here's another question I love too, that my students like to ask. Will I ever see just two treble clefs? Yes, you can see that. You can see that. We see this in some scores of Für Elise by Beethoven, where you will need to bring your right hand up to the treble clef to play that part in the music. So I can point that out to you if you come in for an example of that. So staff, clef, key signature. Key signature just tells you the notes which will be sharpened or flattened throughout the whole piece of music. And then time signature, which we're going to be talking about tomorrow on the C Major Radio Show, is the two numbers that tell you how many beats are there in each bar or measure. So I've gone over that whole definition. Actually, if you have a chance to, go ahead and listen to, you can download on demand. You can download on demand that episode. Because what I want to do is continue our discussion of time values, time signatures, and then tomorrow we're adding tempo. Now, just because I'm talking about tempo doesn't mean I'm talking about rhythm. So rhythm is going to be a totally different episode. But just feel free to take a listen. So, time signature and then tempo indication. So this is basically giving you a sneak preview into what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. So tempo indications, you will also see this on sheet music. So if you have your copy of your sheet music, you're going, what is this? You see a number at the top. Sometimes you'll see an Italian term that's telling you what to do with the tempo, telling you how fast to play it and in the manner that it should be played. So Italian terms written at the beginning of the piece tells you how fast the music should be played. And a term like andante moderato is an indication to play at a comfortable moderate speed. That's just one example of that. So I love that. But that also doesn't tell you the beats per minute. It's like, okay, so Andante moderato, does that mean I'm playing at 72? Does that mean I'm playing at 80? What am I doing? So if you want to be more exact, you can ask for that as well, or ask your music professional. So these are things that you will see on a score. So you can get more into that. Again, if you're taking like an evening class in the evening division of something somewhere, some institution somewhere, then just know you're going to be seeing things like this. Now, we spend a lot of time on terms. I've given you a lot of terms today, and I definitely caught up. And believe it or not, there's more. We're not going to go over these terms today, but stay tuned, because in the future, I want to be able to talk with you about some of these terms. It's important to me to be able to talk with you about some of the things that you may run across, and just to help you feel comfortable as you are learning chords. Now, at the beginning of the podcast, today's episode, I asked you a question. I asked you why you want to learn to play the piano. I did. And it was because I want you to be really clear about your idea to do something like this. So, if it's because you want to impress someone, is it because you really want to know how to play a certain song? Or are you sticking with music over the long term? So ask yourself these questions. Also, ask yourself if you think you might have a chance at making a career out of music. I was reading today. There's a great article online. If you have a chance, check it out. It's an article that talks about 12 famous piano pieces from the movies. So, given the time that we live in, it may even be possible for you to get your music into the movies. Remember that time that Clint Eastwood wrote piano music for one of his movies? It was like the most simplistic sounding piano music, but it was beautiful, just the way he did it. I don't think it had a lot of chords in it, but it might have been mostly single notes, mostly melody, just very sparsely played, but it was beautiful the way that it came across in the film. But let's say you want to try your hand at writing music for the movies. I think that's a possibility for you. So if you have a chance to get a hold of that article, it's saying, and I like what it was saying about the piano, it's saying the piano has become an iconic instrument for numerous films over the years, and that's true. From the day of the silent film to present day, perhaps the appeal of this instrument is that its range spans over 7 1/4 octaves with enormous expressive qualities. It has given rise to some of the most extraordinary pieces of film music, stretching back to the days of the silent movie. And the professor who wrote the article, you can read more information about his career and what he's been able to do. But I took a look at it, just a little quick peek at it. And the first 3 songs, you may recognize these pieces. River Flows in You by Yuruma, Forrest Gump main theme, Pearl Harbor, the main theme by Hans Zimmer. And some of these names you may recognize more than others. Alan Silvestri was the composer of the Forrest Gump main theme. But what I like about Zimmer is that he does write harmonically very simple. You can also write very complex too, but melodically and harmonically the themes are very simple and relatively easy to play. And since you've heard them from the film and you're inspired to play them, it may just motivate you to play them even further. So, let me go back now to what initially I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. Let's see if I can bounce back there. Just want to see if I can get my music going again. It seems to have stopped. I'm going to quit here. It's saying it's being uploaded. I'm going to quit it. And I'm going to come back to it again, because I want some music playing in the background as I talk so it doesn't sound so dry when I'm talking today. But I do want to thank you for joining me today. We're almost approaching our third hour, where I'm going to talk to you in more depth about those chords that we mentioned at the beginning. So let's go back to the beginning. So if you're joining me today, give yourself a big round of applause. We are talking about playing by chords and by color. It's part 6 for today's episode, and there will be more parts to come. Just to give you an idea, it may be 12 parts. I wasn't going to say how many, but I think 12 is a reasonable number. So 6 more episodes of this series, and then finally we can move into something else to keep you going with your music making. But by the time we make it to the end of this series, you should be comfortable with what you know. You'll be comfortable enough to start constructing your own chord progressions, your own sequences, your own color coding, following sheet music and easy play music books, and knowing what to do when you pick up a piece of music, showing you the chord symbols. That's my wish for you. And my other wish for you is that you'll be just as excited about it as I am. When I start to think about the possibilities of picking up a piece of sheet music for the first time, I get really excited about that, because I don't know what I'm going to come in contact with, and I'm excited because it's like an adventure. But maybe not everybody will feel the same. Not everybody's going to feel the same. But that's my wish for you. So let me see if I can get the music started. If not, we'll just leave it off for today. We've heard enough music in our music bed for today, and I'll just have to bring it back another time. Okay, so it's still silent, and yes, this is live, this is in real time that this is taking place. I'm like, why is my music not playing? So I'm going a little bit off script, but that's okay. We live in the digital age, and you have to wait for things to load, and when they don't, then you have to click this and click that. Then you have to close out of this and close out of that, and restart this and restart that. So it's just saying your music is being uploaded to your iCloud music library. If you quit now, your upload will be canceled. Are you sure you want to quit? Yes, let's quit. Okay, that's okay. We don't have to have a music bed. Let me just talk now to you about what we started off talking about. And I want you to be comfortable. So at the very least, you'll have the basics, and you should be able to call on the help of a music professional to guide you the rest of the way. So there's a lot of help online. So you have a piano guy online. You have a person that can help you with your piano playing goals just by watching him do it. You have YouTube celebrities that are available out there to talk to you about your piano playing. There's an online program that you can sign up for. You can register for a year, I think it is, or for a lifetime at a very discounted rate. And just know you'll have access to all of the sheet music that you want. Everything from the easiest sheet music to the most advanced to the expert level. So I was told that my music was too expert to be on that, in that library. I'm not sure what that means, but I think that if you search for the music that you want to find there and you can't find it, you can always put in a request. So they have a lot of music there that you can access, and different levels. It's like gaming the way they set it up. So if you're a member of Starbucks, for instance, and you see how you can earn stars, I think it's kind of like that. It's like a gaming application to it. So it motivates you to keep wanting to do your very best and get to the next level and win stars and points and things like that. So look into that. And just know here in this podcast that we are being a little bit frivolous in the way that we talk about music making. This is something that no one has to do, but it's a want. It's not necessarily a need, especially if you're a recreational learner. But I want to be part of those who are out there trying to open up a gateway for you to walk through in your own way, and just using whatever it takes to help you learn. So if it's color, if it's something else to help you get started, then feel free to use that. There are some method books out there for beginners that can help you. So you may prefer to use the baby books, the ones that are intended for young beginners, or you may decide to use the ones that are accelerated for older beginners. So everything from the old John Thompson books to Bastion, to Faber, to Alfred Publishing. There's Marley. There are so many other methods out there that I've run across. And if you have any young children in your family that are before the age of 4 or right at 4, there's a series called Music for Little Mozarts. Take a look at that. I like it because there are stories that go along with teaching you the basics of music and how to get started into music making. You have a workbook. You can even buy, I think, stuffed animals that can be friends at the piano for the young learners. And it's just endless how easy it is to get into music making now. So just go for it. And this podcast is aiming at adults. It's aiming mainly at adults because adults can guide their own music making and then help the younger people in their family with music making. I really believe that, especially if you are a grandmother, you're retired, you're taking care of the grandchildren during the after school care time before the parents arrive home, and then music making be a big part of that. And if you know a little bit something, you can help them get started too. So there's room for everybody in music making. I really believe that. Now, not everybody will be famous, but you can find a way to get into it if you really, really try. But the larger question is, and I've asked this already, is not why not get into music making, but why. Just be really clear about why you want to do it, so that you have the right intention. So it's not just to necessarily impress someone that you can play one particular song, but to really try to use it for long-term learning. That's what I would say. Just be clear about why you're getting into music making in the first place, because I think that will guide you to your teacher and on the best choices that will help you get to where you're going. So let's just say this, that you decide to get into music making because you want to play one song to impress someone, and then you go to your teacher and the teacher gives you an assessment and says, oh, you have the ability to do, and then they make a list, and then they put you in a method, and then 2 weeks later you're unhappy because you thought it was only going to take you 2 weeks to learn to play that song, which was your real intention in the first place. That's what I mean, because you want to be upfront with a music professional, and they can say either they can help you or they can steer you towards someone else who will be more appropriate for that. Because there are many schools out there, many music professionals that can get you into the type of music making that you're looking for. So just be really, really super clear and just be honest with yourself and the music professional so that you won't come away disappointed. And then 6 weeks in, you stop and no one knows why, because you weren't clear from the very beginning. But there's so much help out there, whether you're looking to learn one song or if you're looking to learn many songs. Me, personally, I like the idea of just being able to pick up a piece of music and know what to do with it, even if I haven't seen it before. That sight reading that we've talked about, that's exciting for me. So if that's not exciting for you and you really want to know that you're going to play something that's familiar, then just be clear that's what you're getting into, and don't go the route of picking a music professional that's going to put you on the road to playing classical music. Now, there's another argument out there, too, that you shouldn't give people what they want. You should give them what they should have and what they don't know that they want yet. That's a different way of thinking. So I just try to work with my students because I feel that if you are helping them to get into music making the way that they see themselves, then eventually they'll make the choice themselves. And that happened with one of my older students. She thought that she was getting into music making to learn how to play the Charlie Brown song. But what she found along the way was she was really interested in learning to play classical music. But in a certain way. She doesn't necessarily want to learn to play it from the most authentic scores. She's probably not going to ever go out and purchase the Peters edition of anything or the Henley edition of anything. She just wants to know how to play the melody and how to chord along in the left hand. So a piano classics book or classics to moderns book, something like that, is the one that's going to work best for her. And she's happy with that. So learning to play the Linus and Lucy song wasn't what she quite thought it would be. And then she just decided she wanted to go that route. And we got her on the right track. And who knows, later on down the line, when she's feeling comfortable, she may decide to go into a music exam program where she's really going to be playing from more original scores and things like that. So just be clear about why you're getting into music making in the first place, because that's going to help guide your teacher on the best choices to help you get to where you are going, and that's important. So some other things to consider besides your age are your ability to see what's on the page. You may need special reading glasses for that. And the Learning a Musical Instrument book talks about this. So I like that book a lot because it really prepares you with the larger questions of what you're getting into or what you're getting back into as you come back into music making for yourself. So I won't quote from it today, but just know this author covers a lot of ground for adults thinking about coming into music making. So we jumped into our new chords, and what we're going to do for the third hour is to help you locate those chords on the piano. So I'm going to be getting my piano ready. Let me just see if I can get it turned on now. And I'm going to decide if I'm using a piano sound through my GarageBand program or if I'm just going to use one directly from the keyboard itself. Also, if you hear my air conditioning in the background, it's because I'm trying to stay cool. It's September, but man, does it feel hot. I mean, it still feels like it's August here in the greater New York City area. Okay, so you'll probably hear me tapping on the keys in the background. But one thing I was saying before, too, is that sometimes when you go on YouTube and you see somebody demonstrating, you're just wondering, why did they choose that piano sound? It doesn't sound very good. Sometimes it sounds better to put it through a program such as GarageBand or choose one of the piano sounds in Logic or Pro Tools or something like that. So I'm going to see if I can do that while I keep an eye on this script. So stickers. Please, after today's episode, please join me over at C Major Before the Show, because I'm going to show you, and I want to show you, and I'm going to show you how to find the placement of the chords on the keyboard. So I won't picture a hand model today, but just to show you where these chords are placed on the keyboard using stickers, something that my adult students really enjoy sing. So please join me over there for that. I haven't decided which stickers I'm going to use. So I don't know if there will be star stickers. I don't know if they're going to be animal stickers. I just don't know yet. But they will be stickers just as a marker to show you the D flat chord, the E flat chord, the A flat chord, the G flat chord, the B, and the B flat. So stick around because I'm going to spell these out for you in black and white key relationships, and I'm also going to spell them out for you in terms of letter names so that you won't go away from here today and go, what did she say? What did she say? Okay, but thank you for tuning in today. Really appreciate your time. And just know that if you stick with me for the next 6 episodes, that I'm going to be talking about these same chords next episode, but how to make those minor. So just like we did for your other chords, and then coming up with a chord drill for you. Okay, so the next episode after that, after we talk about minor chords, we'll finally delve into 7th chords, one of my favorite things to talk about. So I'm going to figure out how I'm going to picture those too. I think I'll use strips for those. I'll use color strips for those. And so we're moving away from the 3-note chords. We're moving away from triads and going to 7 chords, which means you're playing a 4-note chord. So if you want to know how those are placed on a keyboard, then tune in for that. And most times I'll just describe it in root position. We haven't talked about inversions yet and changing the order. So that's a different issue. That's a different situation, if you will. So the next episode after that, the plan is to talk about 9 chords. And then finally, for the last 3 episodes of the series, I'm planning to focus a little bit more on blues and jazz progressions that you can use at the keyboard. So again, not teaching you a song because I don't want to get into the copyright issues of that, but just showing you what the progressions are. If you listen for the changes, you should be okay. You should be able to sit down and make some music for yourself. So thank you everyone for hanging there with us. I really appreciate it. For anyone that's wishing to go beyond that, there are courses that you can take. There are evening division courses that I can point you towards. There's a different series altogether that I may be presenting in the future to help you think about how to apply some of these chords in different genres. And I can always invite you over to the C Major Radio Show if you want to know more there. So we'll talk in terms of black and key relationship today in our 3rd hour. And then if you can, go ahead and check the C Major Before the Show Facebook page for any sticker updates to show you where to locate the triads for yourself. So think of D flat, E flat, and A flat as the chords that all have one white key in the middle. Think of G flat as having all black keys. Think of B as having 2 black keys on top for the 3rd and the 5th. And think of B flat as being the reverse of that with 2 white keys on top. So again, I didn't learn my chords that way because I learned to read music the traditional way. So maybe it was all muscle memory at first and just reading a score, but I didn't think, oh, my thumb is on a white key. Oh, my right hand thumb and index finger on black keys. I didn't think about that. I thought in terms of sharps. I thought in terms of flats. But what I found is really helpful for showing adult students who may not be so privy to the terms and they want to think in terms of black and white key relationships. Visually, it just helps you find your way around the keyboard by describing black and white key relationships. I just saw their eyes glaze over a little less when I was talking about that than when I was talking in more technical terms. If I say, oh, play a B, D sharp, F sharp. I'm like, which one is F sharp again? Which one is D sharp? Are sharps to the right or flats to the right? So we didn't have those issues. And you've probably heard of, in corporate life, in the corporate world, to keep it simple. It's what they call KISS. I don't want to say the whole thing because I don't know if it's PC to say that anymore. But I do like the idea of keeping it simple, keeping it friendly, keeping things color-coded, and it's more of a pragmatic approach, whatever works, to playing the piano, I think, at this point in time. So let me see now if I can pull up my sound for the stage. Let me see if it's going to let me. Oh, I need to hook up my cable. So let me do that while I have you on. So I'm getting ready for the third hour. So anybody's going to hang with me for the third hour, just know that I'm going to be playing chords, not songs, just chords. And at the same time, I'm going to be talking in terms of black and white key relationships. So I just want to make sure I'm hooked here correctly. Let's see, this cable needs to go here. This cable needs to go there. Okay. Let's see what I got here. Okay, now you're going to hear me hit a key. Okay, so the number of my MIDI inputs has changed. And I now have one input available. So let me click on that. Now, I'm not going through an interface. I'm going directly into my computer. So I'm just trying to see if I can get the sound going, because I don't want the sound coming through. Okay, so it's not really working yet. Okay, let me see if I can change this. In 1 second. Sorry to talk off script here. Just trying to get my sound, together. It's not working for me so far. Okay. I'll turn up this all the way up. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I may have a little bit too much echo, too much reverb on that. That may sound a little tinny to you, but I'm really just trying to give you a bigger grand piano sound on the stage. I want to come in through my monitor. So it's the sound, really, reverby with a little bit of echo. It may sound a little tinny in the top. Okay, so hopefully that sound will stay up. So we are about 2 minutes away from our third hour. I'm so excited. And it's time for me to officially ask, September, it's time for me to officially ask, did you do your homework? Did you do your homework? And you can say, yes, I did, because C major is helping you here in the third hour. So I have my software instrument pulled up. It's a grand piano on stage. And I'm going to be helping you find those chords that we talked about. So far we talked about a D flat chord, E flat, A flat, G flat, B, and B flat, and how to distinguish those. I'm going to talk in terms of black and white key relationships. So if you recall how to find your D chord, if you can find a D chord, okay, you can find a D flat chord. So just lower everything. Really just move everything what they call a half step lower. Okay, so if you can find D, you can find D flat. And you'll know if you have it correctly because a D flat chord has one white key in the middle. One white key in the middle. So we're about a minute away from me going through that. And I'm not going to insist that you do a drill today. I'm not going to insist that you do that. But a drill is a good thing. So if you saw me post a drill over at C Major's Classroom for the other chords, you can follow a similar drill for yourself. So just remember, that I want to take you slowly and deliberately and just walking you through the homework for today. So thank you so much for spending the third hour with me today. So homework is back, and we're going to have some fun. And again, if you didn't do your homework, just tune in. I'm going to help you with that, and then I'll try to post some things over at C Major's Classroom. So it's official now as we begin our third hour. We are officially in our third hour here on C Major Before the Show. So thank you for joining me today. And I am going to play for you a D chord followed by a D flat chord. So, okay, that's a D chord. Okay, now I can also play it lower. So if it bothers you to have me play it in the middle, I'll play it here. So to find your D chord, remember to find D in the middle of your two black keys. 1, 2, D is in the middle. Okay, find your spacing on the white keys and then find the black key in the middle and play. Okay, then to find a D chord, what you're going to do is make that D go one note to the left, exactly one note to the left. So it should land on the black key. Okay, so D to the very next note to the left would be D flat. Good. And then your next note is the white key that's to the left of your 3 black key group. Right? And then your next key at the top will be the black key in the middle. So, right in the middle there. Okay, so then you have D flat, F, and then A flat. Okay, and that's your D flat chord. Okay, so again, I'll have you play it as D, and then go back and play D flat. Okay, so I hope you're able to hear all of that. Just make sure my sound is coming through the way I want it to. It is. Okay, so we're good. Okay, now, do the same thing for E. So if you're able to find E before, okay, in our previous episode, you can find E flat. Okay, so just think, okay, 1, 2, E is there to the right of your 2 black key group. And then find your spacing on the white keys, find the black key in the middle and play. Okay, now just do the reverse of that. So left thumb goes on E flat. If you're using simple position, thumb goes on G, second finger goes on B flat. Okay, so then you have a black key, you have a white key in the middle, and a black key on the top. Then, where else do I want to go after that? Let's go to G. Okay. So, G is all white keys, right? But when you make it into G flat, you have all black keys. Okay? So you should be able to hear that I'm lowering that. Okay, now, I missed A, so let's go back and get A. Again, if you're playing a simple position, your left thumb is on A, your right thumb is on the black key, and your index finger is on the white key, and then you just reverse it all and move a half step lower, and that's your A flat chord. Okay, are you with me so far? Hopefully you are. And again, see me over at C Major Before the Show, the Facebook page, because I'm going to be posting there, and I'm using stickers so that you can see where everything is placed. Okay, so far we did D, D flat, E flat, and we go over to A flat, and then G flat. Okay, now the 2 chords that I've missed are B flat, so let's do B first. Okay, and then B flat. Okay, so we haven't done B at all. So B is one of those chords that are considered kind of odd because it's the only chord that has the 2 black keys on top. If you're thinking black and white key relationship. If you're playing in simple position, then your left thumb is on B, and then your right thumb is on a black key, and your index finger is on a black key. So even if you found this, let's say on the white keys first, and then you moved your fingers up to play those 2 black keys, that's what you would get. Okay? And then you reverse all of that, just moving a half step lower, so you can play B flat. So you could make a nice little drill for yourself. You could play And so just begin to experiment with that. I mean, that's really all that it is. If you had some trouble finding these, just let me know. Like I said, I'm not going to take up the whole third hour. I think that the fact that we made it to the third hour is great, that we're over our 2-hour mark from last week, and we're heading into finishing with 3 hours of talk. I think that's great. I mean, that you're staying here with me and that it's helping you to get through your day if you're listening throughout your work day. So, that was it. That's all you have to do for homework. So, if that helps you, that's great. If you need a little bit more help than that, please see me offline. I'll be happy to help you as much as I can. If you are in the greater New York City area, then try to make an appointment to see me at the lesson studio and make an arrangements to have me work with you as an adult student. That would be great. If not, then there are many other options. I may even be able to give you a referral for someone who's close to your area. But there are many, many ways to find a piano teacher nowadays, and there are many of those out there. I will say this. I mean, there are some teachers that still do it the old grassroots way. I was at Starbucks the other day, and I had to laugh because when I came out of the Starbucks, somebody had placed a flyer on my windshield saying, "Would you like to have piano lessons?" And I thought, wow, And the funny thing was, it wasn't on everybody else's car. I thought, well, how did he pick my car to put the flyer on? But it was definitely the grassroots guerrilla marketing way of getting your name out there. You don't have to do that nowadays. There are so many more ways to get your name out there as a teacher and just decide how you want to teach. But I actually may be reaching out to this person. I know this person because he does other entertainment work in the community. And I saw him as he was walking away, and I've run into him before in music retail shopping. So I might be reaching out to him to, see what success he's having with that. But it may be as simple as that. You can go to like a bulletin board where teachers are posting their services. You can just ask around to see who's referring who as a teacher and to get an opinion of what their teaching style is like. I mean, people talk. I mean, they meet at ice cream shops. They meet at Starbucks. They meet at different places, and they are wanting to know who that works for you. And because you live in the same community, that person might just be the right person. So I encourage you today, if you are in the greater New York City area, wherever you are in the world and you're listening to this podcast, find a way to get into music making and find a way to stick with it if you can. There are so many options out there. Learn about your history. Learn how the type of music that you want to make, how it was used in history. Learn the different ways of how you can learn that way, that style of playing that really entices you. If it's possible, stick with something that you're comfortable with. Just because somebody else plays classical doesn't mean that you have to learn to play classical. But I will say this, learning to play classical music is very easy, actually. Whether or not you have success with it is a different issue. But learning to play it is very easy to get into. It's very well organized, and you can use your classical training to take you other places. But if you don't have the patience for that and you want to just learn to play by chords and by ear, then I think it's possible to do that too. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Hopefully you got something out of today's podcast episode. I'm always happy to have you here, and I invite you to listen to our next podcast. And we are going to get longer as we go along. And I see my music made it back. That's great. So I'll be able to sign off with you today with the music that I've been playing in the background. during the episode. So thank you so much for listening today. This is C Major Porter. You've been listening to C Major Before the Show right here on Spreaker. I invite you to join me next week right here. We're going to be talking about the keyboard situation. The keyboard situation, part 7. Believe it or not, we're on part 7. And we're going to be talking about minor chords. So I think what I'll do is just to give you a drill next week. I think drills are good. And so we might just put all of the chords together to show you how to go through a chord drill using the new chords that we learned today as well as your old chords. So thank you so much for listening. Have a fantastic day. Don't forget to check me out over at C Major Porter 1 on Twitter. You can find me over there. Send me a tweet and let me know that you've been listening to the show. And of course, as usual, join me over on the Facebook page. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week. Take care.